morning. This is Jackie Capstick, and this is my podcast, The Natural Healing Reel. Today, I have, of course, another amazing guest, and Marque Kolack. Marque Kolack is my guest today, and he is a gift for sure. He just, with his few words, grounded me very deeply into the core of the universe, which I am always in need of. He is an intuitive empath, a spiritual coach, a yoga meditation teacher, speaker. He's a trained writer, musician. But he's got 40 years of this behind his belt, and he has a lot to share. So without ado, I will introduce you to Marque Kolack. How are you today, Marque?
I'm really good, Jackie. Thank you so much for asking, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Why don't we start today with giving us a little bit of your background so we could kind of start from what you'd like to have us know about you in what's important for what you're sharing today and move us forward.
Okay, great. Well, like you said, I work currently as a spiritual coach and a spiritual teacher. And, I think our lives really start out with everything that we need to have in this life shows up when we're kids, but no one's ever really around to identify that for us. And so oftentimes with clients, I'll say, well, look back and tell me what were some of the things that were surrounding you as a kid, some of the things you were interested in, some of the things that happened to you, some of the synchronistic events that occurred for you. And I'll bet that they were all pointing you in the direction of who you are and why you incarnated on this earth. And so for me, that certainly was the case, because early on, I found that I always had different ideas than most of the kids, in the neighborhood, in the class or whatever. And I started getting visitations from spiritual beings when I was a teenager, and started having mystical experiences when I was also a teenager, and was always very curious about why it was that the world didn't work, and would always talk to people, my parents included, as to why it was that they were saying things that they didn't mean, and why it was that they didn't say things that they really meant to say, because as an intuitive empath, I could perceive those things. And I often wondered why people never talked about how they really felt. So it dawned on me early on that everyone was wearing, and myself included, I'm sure, this mask, that we sort of go through life with. And it just became painfully obvious to me that there was this mask that everybody was forced to wear for some unconscious reason I didn't know, and not say things that they wanted to and say things that they didn't want to, in order to do two things: get love and remain safe. And that we were modifying our behavior, our soul's essence, in order to do those two things, as some sort of edict, some sort of physical edict that we had to do these things in order to survive. We had to remain safe, we had to get love, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to do that. So I kind of rebelled against that early on. And my father died when I was a kid. So in my early years, when my stepfather, I like to affectionately call the evil stepfather, appeared on the scene, who made it a point to make sure that I felt bad about myself pretty much every day, and told me that I was worthless and that I would never amount to anything. So I knew early on that, must be something going on here, because this isn't true. This isn't true that I'm worthless. And it's not true that I'm not going to amount to anything. And yet, he was trying to teach me that. But what I learned from that was that I was totally awesome, and I was totally expansive, and I was totally powerful. So early on, I realized that the people who are our greatest nemesis are our greatest teachers. And the people who hurt us the most are the people who actually are our greatest teachers, which is a little bit inverted for the way we look at life, because most people wind up, myself included, to a certain point, being victims to circumstances, victims to childhood, victims to conditions that happen, in our childhoods and when we're younger, and well, all through our lives, certainly. And thinking that somehow we created these things because there's something wrong with us. So I like to call that the lie of unworthiness. And I think if there's any real pandemic today in the world, it's the lie of unworthiness. That's really the pandemic that's sweeping the world, that's causing most of the problems, that people acting out of a sense of fear in order to regain their personal power. And as a result, wind up doing things that are out of integrity with themselves, others, and the world around us. And as a result, create unintended outcomes. So the world is filled with unintended outcomes. And if you doubt that, or anybody doubts that, just turn on the news and you'll get your fair share of war on every continent, and all the tyranny and injustice that's going on everywhere, and the crimes against humanity in terms of starvation and loneliness and homelessness and all these things. These are things that have no real reason to be, except that there's no political will to have them be any different. So really, I'm really about, and have been pretty much my whole adult life, healing myself of the things that I just mentioned, and coming up with the observations of the things that I just shared with you through my self-reflection on the world and the way things are, and then assisting other people one at a time or in groups to identify their core lie of unworthiness, and to realize that in fact it is a lie, and in fact that we are all divine beings, and that we are radiant beings of love and light. And as a part of the divine, we can't possibly be bad or wrong or stupid or unloved or unlovable or incapable or inadequate or not good enough or unworthy or unimportant or unseen or unheard. We can't be any of those things, because we are one with the infinite spirit. And to say that we are any of those things is to say that God is that, because we are that. So that's impossible.
That's really hard for everybody to understand, though, because everybody sees such separateness, right? Because they don't understand. Most people that aren't into really going through and understanding this work we're not educated about the fact that even though everything does look that we're separate, that we are all like this interconnection of each other. And especially when people look at a situation and say, well, I don't like her at all, and she does this, this, and this, and vice versa. And that separateness, people can't. I know for myself, it took me a while to have that understanding of how is it that we're all one when we are looking so separate in this three-dimensional earth plane, right?
Yes. Well, it's certainly a good question that maybe begs to be answered, and only in that, in truth, there's only one life. There's only one energy. Quantum physicists call God the existence or the presence of a field of energy, of light energy, which no one knows how it got here. It just is. And it is aware of itself. It is creative. It is animating. And it is expressing itself as all things, form and non-form, in the universe simultaneously. And it has certain qualities that represent itself to us as humans, with our minds and our ability to perceive things, as certain qualities: love, peace, joy, exhilaration, exuberance, compassion, understanding, empathy, kindness, caring, these kinds of things, cooperation, collaboration, sustainability, justice. So if there was more than one real power in the universe, that would be one thing. But in fact, there's only, in my model anyway, there's only this one power, one love, one God, one creator, one consciousness, what I like to call the Wi-Fi of infinite intelligence, that lives everywhere simultaneously and is like beaming to each one of us. So in order for people to experience our external oneness, that's a leap.
Yeah.
But first, we have to, each individual is called upon by their own soul in their own timing to find that oneness inside of themselves, where they are one with their own self. And so that's where the self-healing comes in. It all starts right here in the heart. And that's the unification where we, with our mind and our heart, as our soul. And through spiritual practices like prayer and meditation, visualizations and affirmations and things like that, every individual has the opportunity through practice, through some sort of spiritual practice, to still that insane mind, that monkey mind, that crazy mind. And when we still that mind, we're brought into our center. And in that center, we then experience our intuition. So there's another voice that speaks to us, not just the voice of our head, but the voice of our heart or the voice of our soul through intuition. And then we start getting different kinds of information than we have gotten in the past that maybe our ego and our head thoughts and head, voice have taught us. And as we start to get new information from our intuition, one of the things that it informs us through actual words, through pictures, and through deep, incredible feelings of love and fulfillment, it informs us that in fact we are one.
Yes, and I think that's the secret right there, is that we're all looking outside for something to fill, and everything is just within. It's just we just weren't taught that, right? Well, I mean, I wasn't taught that. So learning to, get over the big words of meditation and prayer and, get past all of these, whatever those words mean to people, right? Because they all kind of come with some power or some kind of, prayer means that you're religious. So, so just getting past that too also, right? And just closing your eyes and breathing into your heart. That's it. That's all we need to do. You don't need to go to anywhere. You just need to go within, and everything, once you connect, everything's there. But we're not taught that. Even in our churches and stuff, we're taught, not that I went, I wasn't subjected to any of that as a child, but learning all that now, we're all looking still without, like for them, like for God without, like is outside of us, right? To come and fix, which yes, we definitely have access to that assistance all the time if we're asking. But just to know that we're a spark. Like I always like to look at like all the stars in the sky, on a bazillion starry night, but that's each one of us. And we're all an extension of, or a connection of, and that's kind of my visual of how I can visually accept the oneness, I guess, so yeah, but it's all just the connection of going within and in the heart, and that's where the magic is, right? That's where everything is.
Absolutely. Beautiful. So if people have perceptions or stereotypic, interpretations or judgments on these words, like the words that you just described, the words that I mentioned that then you just, that you brought up. These are things, these judgments and interpretations, like you said, are unfortunate because we've been programmed and have bad tastes in our mouths from things like religion or education or media or different forms of the world that are very, I can't think of the word right now. They do one thing and they say another thing. Whatever that word is, my mind has gone blank now.
Yeah, they're contradictory. Yeah, it's not what they say they are.
Yeah, exactly. So then we learn not to trust. What I would suggest for anybody who's watching this or listening this is that to find out what these things might mean for them, apart from anything that we have ever learned, like in religion or education or something like that. And like you just described, it's so simple as a form of meditation to just sit and breathe into your heart for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, several times a day. And again, anybody who's listening to this, that is a biological connectivity with our soul. And all good forms of spiritual practices are actually biological practices as well. So they're not philosophical necessarily. They're not even spiritual necessarily. They're not even religious necessarily. They're actually biology, that there are certain biological things that, like you said earlier on today, amongst other things, we were never taught. We were never taught early on. And certainly breathing into one's heart is a biological tool that anybody who's listening could practice this and begin to still their mind and connect with their soul for sure. And it doesn't have to be any more complicated. Like you said, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, because what we're after is an experience of the divine, an experience of the energy that keeps us alive, an experience of our soul. And that has a voice of its own, which is different than the voice of our ego. I like to say that, at a minimum, we are the dweller on the threshold between two parallel worlds. There's a higher world and there's a lower world. And the higher world of God and presence and the divine and all these things, and then the lower world of the world and how horrible and tyrannical things can be. And that we have a choice in a sense of where we want to put our attention at any one given time. And in order to do that, we have two operating systems. We have an ego mind operating system for the lower world, and we have a heart intuitive operating system for the higher world to keep us connected. So the first thing that I often suggest that people attempt to do is to distinguish the voice from your head and the voice from your soul, the voice of your ego and the voice of your heart. And I think if people were able to distinguish between those two things, we would all be well on the path to then being able to refine that distinction or to refine that experience. And then we could say no to the voices in our head that make us crazy, right? We all know we got a voice in our head, at least two. And usually it's a whole chorus. And oftentimes it's telling us things that, the ego is really very funny, like, oh yes, the ego told me I should go and eat this piece of chocolate cake, and I don't like chocolate, and I'm allergic to it, but I ate it anyway, and I got sick. It's like, and we do these things. We just follow this voice in our head, and it's just so bizarre. So to realize, okay, that's not leading me anywhere. And then we say, no, I'm not really interested in chocolate cake right now. Not that there's anything wrong with chocolate cake, but for the individual specifically, maybe it's not the best thing, whatever. And instead say no to those things in our heads and say, instead, affirm what we want.
That's the practice right there.
Right there.
And I think just understanding that we are not the voice in the head. We all finding that you're the listener. Your soul is the one that's listening to, I want the chocolate cake. Oh, I know that there's one piece left and if I don't get it, then someone's going to get it before me. That's not you, but we think that that's us. And so how do you share with your people how to find that separation so people can start to, because I believe if, unless we can start to see what is happening and that we're not in charge, we've just let that take off and run itself. And that, I believe, is part of the problem, is that it's like a teenager on spring break. It's got no curfews, no boundaries, no whatever. It's just on a free-for-all running around saying and believing and we all believe that that's the truth, and it actually is just not. So how do you share? How do you teach people how to find?
Well, two things come to mind. The first thing is that everybody comes to this stuff when it's their time, in a sense, to come to this stuff, and not everybody on the earth incarnated to get it this time.
Interesting.
It'd be nice to think that everybody who's here, not that we don't all have the potential, but then we all have the potential to be president too, and I don't see any of us doing that. You know what I mean? So we all have the potential to be Gandhi, but I don't see anybody doing that particularly. More like we have the potential to be ourselves, like who our soul is, what our soul lessons are. And that gets into like karma, reincarnation. But if you don't believe in that sort of thing, just to say, just in the short of it, that, we each have sort of our own little purpose for ourselves, I believe, that's within a certain parameters of our soul and our soul's lessons that we came to the earth to learn. And not everybody is going to get that they are enlightened in this incarnation. And so they have to play their part, exactly what their part is. Unfortunately, their part might be hurting them, but benign to others, or their part might be hurting others as well. We don't know. And so that's why it's taking so long, in a sense, because everybody has to come to it when their soul gets to it. And the only time our soul gets to it is like when we have that rock bottom experience, which I know you know about, and I know about, which gets to the second part of the answer to your question about how do I talk to people, making a distinction between what they think and what their soul is that it's our emotions. Our emotions are our barometers. Our emotions are the things that inform us as to what our experience is. Like, how do you feel? Oh, I feel like crap. Or, oh my God, I feel fantastic. So let those be the barometers. Let those be the distinction between the two voices for people in the beginning. Hey, if I feel great, if I feel fantastic, then whatever you're thinking, because our thoughts create those feelings. So whatever you're thinking then is translating in terms of biochemical mixtures in the hypothalamus, and is mixing those 50,000 chemicals that then flood through the nervous system that we experience as an emotion. So if you're feeling fantastic, it means that you're thinking something that's mixing chemicals in your brain that's making you feel fantastic. So whatever you're thinking is probably coming from your soul, because oftentimes the soul, in fact, lives in a place of fantastic. The soul lives in a place of bliss. The soul lives in a place of peace. The soul lives in a place of exhilaration and exuberance and joy and compassion. And the soul lives in that place, but it gets covered over with the other the thoughts of the ego, which are thoughts, which then translate into our body as the lower 5 emotions: anger, fear, grief, guilt, and shame, for example. So when we're in that lower emotional state, is to become, and it takes a certain amount of self-reflection, because self-reflection is probably the most powerful, one of the most powerful competencies that any human has in order to make these kinds of distinctions. So when we use self-reflection or mindfulness, and we go, why do I feel so bad? I was feeling great a minute ago, the sun was out, I was happy, all of a sudden I'm feeling like crap. Then the next question you ask yourself is, well, what am I thinking? What am I thinking right now that's causing me to feel this way? So in that moment, what we're doing is we're slowing down our thinking, in a sense, by being self-reflective and mindful and asking ourselves, what am I thinking? And in the process of doing that, because like you said a minute ago, it's the soul that's asking that question. What am I thinking right now that's causing me to feel like crap? So once we ask that question, what am I thinking? Then we get a read. Oh, I'm thinking that I'm afraid because I know tomorrow I have this meeting at 2:00 and it's freaking me out, and I don't know what it is that I'm going to say or what is it I'm going to do or whatever. So then you can deal with that. Then you can take a deep breath, and the individual can say to themselves, oh, well, I'm totally capable. I've got all my notes together. Everything's groovy. I don't need to be afraid. It's cool. So then I feel fantastic. And then you affirm what you want rather than listening to by default, which you said a minute ago, and going with what we don't want and imagining that that's reality, when that's not reality. At a minimum, that's only 1/2 of reality. That's potentially the lower half of reality. And a lot of people, like you said, we live in that lower half of reality, not realizing we have a higher half of reality, which is what we affirm, which is what we want. And that comes from our soul. And we're informed by our soul about, I want to be happy, or I am happy, or I feel fantastic. Even if you don't in the moment, if you say that long enough to yourself, you're going to start to feel that way, because you're going to start to mix chemicals that are going to spread through the body and make different kinds of emotions. So just to complete on that thought then, 1, not everybody's going to get here. And 2, as we go through our dark night of the soul experiences, and as we go through the experiences that we have of hitting rock bottom, where we go, you know what, my life stinks. I'm sick, I'm unwell, I don't feel good, I'm unhappy, I'm depressed, I'm whatever. I don't like my lover, I don't like my home, I don't like my environment, I don't like my job, I don't like my financial situation, like any of these things, and it's pissing me off. That's great. That's fantastic. Because that's the place that we have to get to before we go, okay, what's the other possibilities now? And how do I begin to listen to my own thoughts that are, by the way, creating this reality for me? Because our external reality is nothing more than an expression of what we say to ourselves. And one of the most powerful tools we have in terms of growth and expansion and transformation and change is what we say to ourselves, what we allow that voice in our head to say to ourselves and get away with. So that it's running on the subconscious level. It's running this, I'm bad and wrong and you're stupid and oh my God, you screwed up and life is hard. And we have this whole litany of beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world around us that are limited. And as a result, that externalizes as the world. And then we don't like our situation and we don't like our people we're with and we don't like our jobs and we feel this way and we feel that way. But from a spiritual standpoint, in a sense, that's perfect because that's what brings us the anger. And that's a good kind of anger. It's a good kind of anger because that anger is the jet fuel for emotional change and transformation. And when we get either angry enough or sad enough or hurt enough where we just surrender or we fall flat on the floor, we go, God, help me, please. God, help me. I just can't do this on my own. And that is a very powerful place to be. Once we get to that place of complete and absolute, give it up and surrender to God and say, God, please, thy will be done. Not some make-believe God, but the infinite spirit God, the source God, the divine God, the real infinite intelligence of the universe that's running everything, that is in fact the essence of our souls. That's the God that I'm talking to, not a God outside, but it's, okay, soul, take over. Shut my mind down in that way and give me some peace, please, and take over my life and take over my experience. And in that moment of surrender, the angels are there. You can hear the trumpets. And they're playing their harps, you know, and it's like, oh my God, someone's waking up, a blip on the screen. Thank you. You know, they're waking up. Fantastic. So everybody has to get to that place. And as we get to that place, then we use our emotions as the barometers to know how I'm feeling. And if it feels lighter and more expansive, then it's probably from your soul. And if it feels heavier or darker, it's probably from your ego.
Yeah. Well, you know, 100%. And I think that, you know, the 50 to 70,000 thoughts that are running through the subconscious mind every day that we're unaware of, that is a whole process that I've been working on for a while. And it's quite frightening when you look and start to be the watcher of your thoughts, because most of them are not true. A lot of our thoughts are thoughts that somebody else said that we once heard, that, and all of a sudden they're in as a belief system of ours that we don't even know, because we've not checked in to find out, even like say, you know, that whole self looking at, you know, just stepping back and having a look at, okay, what are those thoughts that are running through my head? What are my belief systems? You know, I've been doing so much work in upgrading and replacing, because, you know, once I looked, I realized I've lived a whole life in fight or flight, of abandonment, of, you know, if you were to ask me, I had an amazing family, but there was unfortunately this whole segue of my birth to whatever, that I was abandoned. Everybody was busy working, and the damage and the stuff that does to a little child, the perceptions that are left that we hide deep dark into the crevices of the base of, you know, that's the work. Because a lot of it is just, you know, a lot of us, I think we don't want anybody to know because we don't know. And it feels dark and it feels scary and it feels like not enough. And so then we bury and hide some more of it. But all it is just, what I have found out is it's just shining some light down there and letting that little girl know that, hey, you know what, we got this, we made it, we're here, and I got you. And just re-perceive that whole that you weren't enough, and that, all of everything really just starts the basis of that, right? Those perceptions of people looking at us and them not feeling enough, and looking at you like you're not enough, and like this mirroring that we do, that we take on as our own. If somebody's judging us, then we take that. Hopefully we don't take it, but if you do take it, it's usually because it's, your perception of your not enoughness, or, and it's all just bullshit, excuse my language. None of it's true. And we're ruining and not being able to live in our present and create our abundance and our future of our dreams, because we just keep living, bringing those thoughts into today, right? That's been my big teachings and work, and being aware of, and finding out the stories that go through your head sometimes are kind of scary, because it can really run away. It gets off on a real tangent. If you're listening to it, it can be quite like, holy cow, well, that's quite a story, right? And it's just on a free for all, because we haven't taken charge of it. We were supposed to be in charge of those thoughts, and we never were taught that. It's just, like I said, been on spring break, and just that awareness of, what am I telling myself? What stories am I creating all this fear and sickness in my body, because it energetically just holds everywhere within, doesn't it? So that's been my work, and it's really, really been, thank God, helpful. Like I think for people to understand that we're not those thoughts, and those thoughts are perceptions, and they're really worth taking your time to listen to those thoughts, and realize that, is that a good thought? Or when you're having that experience, your thoughts are going, is this a good thought for me? Is this even true? Like, is this beneficial for me? Because this is a choice. I'm choosing in my present moment to think this. Is this good for me? Or do I want to create something new? How powerful are we for that? Like, having that information for me has been life-changing.
Yeah, excellent. I think it's life-changing for everyone, because like you said a minute ago, that's the work.
And we all have this work. Nobody gets the free for all. Like, everybody thinks, oh, well, she's off on that little spiritual thing. You know what? You better get in the lineup, because nobody gets off for free on it. Everybody has the work to do. It's if you want any kind of peace in your life, right? Because we've got to find how this is all working, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's some people that come in that are unlike me, that already have that all that system all in play. But I think for a lot of people that I speak with, they don't either. They don't know. We've not been taught a lot of what we need to know to function easily and happily and healthfully.
Yeah, and that's why we're here. That's why we go through what we go through. I know that you've been through a lot in your life, and to hear you say the things that you just said really does my heart good, because I know that those strategies that you just espoused are in fact the way for all of us to heal ourselves. And it's a step-by-step, and it's a very graphic sort of process. And as a coach, that's what I help other people to do, is to inform them that, hey, there are certain principles in the universe that supersede Newtonian time and space physics principles. And these principles, it behooves us to learn about them and to live our lives by them, because they are the governing principles of the universe. And so once people find that out, the idea is to try and learn about these principles and live our lives as best we can in alignment with these principles. And then we go kicking and scratching and screaming and biting, going, no, I can't do this, I won't do this, because we think we're having to give something up, to the world that is good for us. But the only thing that we wind up giving up are things that harm us and hurt us as we go into alignment with who we really are. So I have my 3 Ps, the principles, then learning about the principles, and then perspective. So once we realize that the universe is governed and our lives are governed by certain principles, and we start to learn what they are, like I am divine. So that's a divine principle. I'm divine. I'm one. I am actually, in truth, a being of love and light, come from some far off distant galaxy, showing up in this body and incarnated here in this body, and I am divine. So to me, that's like a principle. So then once you get that, and you're willing to entertain that as a possibility, then you have to change your perspectives about everything. Because if that's true, that means that how I thought about myself and my core lie, that's not true anymore. So that's the perspective that needs to change. Or that life is limiting, and that things never work for me, or I never get what I need. All of those things need to be changed too. So once we get the principles, then we start to change the perspectives that were habitual and unconscious, that were learned, by default as children all the way up through. We have to change those perspectives. And the way that we do that, to integrate the principles into our lives through changing our perspectives, is through certain practices. So we practice doing it. So we practice, for example, being mindful, like you mentioned before, we talked about. We practice this idea of being self-reflective and mindful, and looking at our thoughts and evaluating our thoughts and evaluating our beliefs, and or breathing into your heart. Or for me as a yoga teacher, that's a practice where we use breath and movement as a way to create leverage for emotional change. So breath and movement for leverage for emotional change, because it's hard to change your mind using your mind. So it's useful because it can be very incestuous, obviously, because you don't know which mind you're actually listening to. Oh, okay. Oh, well, no. And it's like, oh my God, which mind am I supposed to be listening to here? So using breath and movement then, which is what yoga really is the art of using breath and movement as leverage for emotional change, and as a way to beeline a path into the soul. That's what that is. And so when we slow our breath down and when we do certain kinds of movements, then it stills our mind. And through stilling our mind, we get to be reflective of our mind. And once we get to be reflective of our mind, like you said, the watcher, we're the soul, we're the watcher of our thoughts, then we get to choose whether these thoughts are advantageous or healthy for me or not. And in that process, through that choice, then we get to say no to certain kinds of thoughts. I know in certain kinds of metaphysics, it's called denial and affirmation, where you deny the things that you don't want to be thinking and you change them and affirm the things that you do want to be thinking. So again, every individual comes to a place in their life where this is the work, and identifying more and more of different principles that are really running things and distinguishing them from the lies of the world, and then shifting our perceptions to align with those principles, and then practicing ways to stay in that state as often, as many minutes of the day as possible. Like, that's the work, and that's what we teach as coaches. That's what I help people to be able to develop, are those practices and ways to stay connected with their soul, especially in challenging situations. Because in challenging situations, whether it's our current times or something personal in someone's life, when things don't go according to how we would like them to go, usually out of fear, the ego kicks in and starts raising havoc. And then the person starts to feel angry or resentful, or they want to lash out, or they're afraid, or they get depressed, and they go into grief and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, for example, practices of breath and movement, you develop the ability to find a place of resilience within the individual, within yourself, in your practice time, so that when you're in the world and something occurs, because you've practiced it enough, you can go back to that place and you can remain calm and centered and focused and even loving in challenging situations. And I think on some level, that's about as good as we can ask for or hope for, because it's not a question of if something negative or a challenge is going to occur in our lives, it's when. Because in the material world, there's always going to be a challenge. It doesn't have to be something like negative, like really, really bad, like negative, but there are challenges. And so the question is, when challenges occur, how are we going to respond? And do we have the tools to develop that resilience inside of us to come back to those situations with love and compassion and understanding? Yeah.
Yeah, and just to be able to hold your space when somebody's, you're in a situation, you're being triggered, and to have the skills to stand there and just to breathe and to know that the energy is uncomfortable but it's going to pass, and just to not clench down and jump into the process, but just to let whatever energy that there's coming forth at you, just to let it pass through. Because if we do kind of react, then we get to hold on to whatever that was coming on past us that wasn't supposed to, right? Anyways, I don't know if I said that properly, but I find that the triggers and the reactions, and it'll take you out for a whole day, sometimes 2 days. But if you have that understanding, just having the knowledge of, well, they would say knowledge is power, right? But then you have to have the understanding of what it is that you need to do so that you can hold your ground and hold your state of peace, so people aren't knocking you around all day out there, because we're living in intense energies and intensities of, fastest vibrations ever on earth, right? They say in the universe through the secular centuries or whatever, it's the highest, fastest vibrations we've ever experienced. And I believe that, even though I'm feeling that, it's intense and going through lots, I believe everybody's feeling the intensity. What do you think about that?
Yeah, everybody's feeling the intensity. And the good part of it is that intensity, according to my model, is in fact the divine, the creator, the infinite love and light of the universe is awakening itself through every molecule, every atom, every particle, every cell of all life forms on Earth. And all the different, the 7 kingdoms, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, the mineral kingdom, the angelic kingdom, all the different kingdoms, it's all happening simultaneously, and you can't stop it. And when and as the divine awakens itself through anything, it's going to bring up everything unlike itself in order to be purified, balanced, cleansed, aligned, harmonized, detoxed, and healed. So what we're experiencing is that we're going through a major healing crisis right now on planet Earth, because our souls are awakening and it cannot be stopped. So the good news is that. And in a sense, the challenging news is that it creates uncomfortable situations for individuals, all of which are leading individuals to that dark night of the soul, to that that breakdown kind of, so they can have a breakthrough experience. Because it's not until like we hit rock bottom, like we talked about before, where we start making different kinds of choices and decisions, where we ask God for help, or where we connect with ourselves and realize that, hey, I am God as far as I'm concerned, and I have a soul in me, and this is a creative energy, and I can pretty much manifest things differently. So ultimately, I like to say that we're on the precipice of birthing the new Renaissance.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. I do. And we have like the contrast and the clarity, right? I mean, the contrast is becoming so extreme that you have to, it's like, for me, I just have this, landing on my head 3 times, I'll just crack your head open so you get some light in there, because clearly, there's a message trying to come through and I'm just not picking it up, right? Like that's how I view, the traumas is it's just, I obviously needed to land on my head 3 times just to, really, just crack it open, just to get some light in there and something new, something new coming through that.
Well,
Yeah,
just to jump in there, since you're talking about head injuries, I had 5 concussions by the time I was 23.
bless you.
Yeah. So, and I don't, I talk to people about it once in a while. And no one I know has ever had that experience. So of course, like you, I have to ask myself, so, but this is started when I was like in intermediate school, high school, I guess, and then went through to my early 20s. And so why was that occurring? And was it because, I did something wrong, or was I stupid, or was I, not being mindful, or was in fact my soul orchestrating everything? And I just believe that ultimately, that the soul orchestrates everything. And we may not like it, and we may not like how it does it, but the bottom line is that we are our soul, and it knows what we can take, I guess, and what we can't. So if we were to look at, especially anybody listening to this podcast right now, that whatever the negative situations are that you're in currently, on the one hand, you could say that you're creating it through your negative thoughts, and that's certainly worth looking at. And if you have negative limiting thoughts about yourself, others, in the world around, I would invite people to change those thoughts to be more aligned with love and compassion and caring and kindness. And then ultimately self-love and forgiveness are the most important things, and that they're really accessed through gratitude. The second part is that it's our soul that's actually orchestrating all of that, because the model that I come from says that there's only one life, one mind, one power, one God, one creator, one consciousness, and that is good, all good, all God, all good, all love, all possibility. And so it will do whatever it needs to do as the Wi-Fi of infinite intelligence to awaken all aspects of life within us, and right now within our world, which is why we're seeing the collapse of everything that was created out of tyranny, everything that was created out of control, everything in the world that was created out of injustice is falling apart. And it has to fall apart because the creator is waking up. And the creator is waking up through all the systems of the world, through science, through biology, through chemistry, through finances, through social, through every science, through everything. The creator is awakening itself. And as that occurs, there's going to be some shit that's going to come down for every individual. And like we were talking about before too, that's when people get afraid and go, oh my God, like what's happening? It's like, well, what if this too was perfect? What if all of this was actually totally perfect? Because in the original creation, that never changed. That essence of divine love has never changed. And ultimately, it's always in control. But the challenge is the individuals have to go through their principles, practices, and perspectives to find the place inside themselves where their traumas are perfect. And that's not always an easy thing to do, but that place does exist because, in fact, my model, they are perfect, because it's the soul that's orchestrated even the traumas. Now, we can help our soul by getting the lessons of what it is that the traumas that the soul needed to create the traumas for. And if we have repetitive things, injuries or things that happen to us in our lives, then we probably just need to be a little more mindful, and we need to slow down, and we need to get that, breathe into our hearts like we talked about, and look at our thoughts and get that we are whole and complete and beautiful and wonderful, because out of that sense of that core lie is where we act in ways that create these unintended outcomes for us oftentimes. So once we heal that lie, and kind of full circle in our conversation today, once we heal that lie of unworthiness, to get that we are divine, that we are infinite beings of love and light, that we are expressions of God and love in the world manifest. And as such, it's one thing to understand that in our heads. It's nice to understand that in your head. It's nice to even realize it's a possibility, but at some point you have to get it into your experience. So we use meditation and things like that to get these thoughts of possibility into our bodies. And once we start to have the experience of ourselves as being whole and complete, then we emit a different field into the larger field. And then the reflection is all manner of seen and unforeseen good starts to show up in your life. So it starts really with gratitude, self-forgiveness, and not judging ourselves or stopping the war with ourselves. Everybody, we have this war with ourselves where we're constantly berating ourselves and making ourselves bad and wrong for doing this or not doing that. Stop that. Stop that conversation. Don't allow your mind to take you to that place anymore. Instead, look in the mirror, breathe into your heart and say, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you to yourself, and I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. And then we emit a different field, and that field manifests all manner of beautiful things for us in our lives.
Something that was just coming through my head was the fact that, so all of the thoughts that we've already had that have been manifesting, that we've been unconscious of, they're already here, so we can't really make them go away, because so we need to create the story, like a story around, like a new story with them, so it takes a corner, right? So if we're listening to, blah 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 blah, okay, well, so if I'm pretending, trying to get rid of it, we're creating more resistance. And so I've been doing this practice of, okay, well, what is that I'm believing that so deeply is affecting me, and then adding to that story in a way that it makes a turn and creates the energy and feelings and thoughts of something that will start projecting and showing more, well, just a different contrast, right? Like just not so much contrast, but some clarity as to, because it's not going away. I already manifested those already, right? Is what they're saying. So it's already here. So you can't make it go away. So I've been adding to those stories that I'm finding that are so deep grained, and then turning it like kind of like that little girl, right? Like, okay, I got you, look, we're here, we made it, right? And you're good. Like that kind of feeling, right? Like adding to the story, but taking a right turn with it.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good example. So give us another example.
Oh, come on, seriously? That just came from wherever, but
Okay, no, just checking.
what, I don't know that I have another example right off the top of my head when you said that. But I just know that the universe is polarized, right? And so with the contrast and the clarity, with all of this contrast that's happening, we know whether we like it or not, we're going to get some clarity, right? And so just maybe creating that clarity, right? Because now once we are in the present and we're moving forward, we are the creators. So are we going to create by talking about what didn't work for us? Or are we going to turn the story into, okay, and so now, got into my sports car, right? Put it into fifth and just started going, right? Just dropped her and started dropping her. Like, where are we headed, right? Because it's up to us. We get to decide. And I think that a lot of us don't have any understanding that we are that creative force. That is, if we can see it and feel it and create that vision of what we want to feel, and even if we don't know what it looks like, or okay, well, where are you going? Well, I don't know. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Just go into how you want to feel. Go into the best feeling that you've ever felt, right? And breathe into your heart, open it up, and then just keep expanding that, right? And I think that if we could go into that and we can just create that feeling, that's how we expand the universe. That's how we help heal this nasty contrast that we're all experiencing, right? Is doing the opposite. This doesn't feel good, so we turn around and walk this way. But we are the creators, but only if we leave the past and the stories where they were and create from a new story, right?
Beautiful. Now what? Yeah, it's not what happens, it's what we do with it and where we extend the story from. I think that's a really great way to put it. And what you said was that, go breathing into your heart, like that's the way to make the new things sort of happen. And that ultimately,
It's so powerful, isn't it? Like if just anybody, like if you just close your eyes and just breathe in for 5 and out for 5, you do that a couple of times, boy, you can feel your whole energy field shift. And it really, like, it just takes a couple of minutes, just give ourselves that couple of minutes to just go and close your eyes and go within. And that's a practice though. It's a tool, it's a formula. It's part of, okay, here I am, I'm not happy, I'm not experiencing really great things. Okay, here's a list of things I know that I can do to switch me like that, right? That's what I believe that we all need to have. We all need to have our tools, our toolkit, and know that those tools, which one do I need right now, right? I've got a box full. So this one's quick, this one will work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I do anyways. So I think that we all, if you're aware, we all need to have that toolbox.
Yeah, we need to have practices. Without practices, we're kind of lost.
Yeah, I find that with not going back to work and stuff after this COVID and not having that, that same regular schedule, it's to create that a pattern, a structure and stuff. It's interesting that if it's not being forced upon you to then create that yourself, that structure is it's so important, isn't it? I've really come to understand that in this last little bit, just keeping ourselves on some kind of program that I know will keep me moving in the right direction, right? Keep the wheel rolling.
Well, that's good because it allows us to develop new structures and new systems and new practices that are based more from our hearts. So, being shuttered in place is a good way to have to rethink who am I and how can I remain sane and how can I remain happy and healthy and all those things without the ways of the world, without the ways that things have been. So some people have experienced a lot of, pain from that and ultimately have come through that pain because they've discovered new resources within themselves and tapped a kind of resilience that otherwise was not being challenged before. And, just to complete on that, I think that ultimately getting back to this, birth of a new age of love and stuff, that when we learn to live from our hearts and not just breathe into them, but certainly as a way to, because the heart is a tool of perception. It's designed to live through and to perceive reality through, not to perceive reality through our heads, but through our hearts. And so what does life look like when we learn to breathe into our hearts, when we learn to hear with our heart rather than our head and our ego, and speak from our hearts and act from our hearts and think with our hearts rather than with our heads and with our egos, because as that tool, as that brain in the heart, it has the ability to lead us into a whole new realm of, a new root race of humanity. And there have been beings who have shown up on the planet over the centuries, the millennium, who were examples of divine beings who came to Earth in order to be able to demonstrate what's possible for humans. And the one thing that they had in common was that they talked about love being the foundation for this new race, this new root race of humanity to be able to be born. So I believe that that's where we are. We are faced with connecting to the heart, learning to live from our hearts. And as we do that, then we become like those great beings who have come before us and express the divinity that is our soul on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. And that's the birth of the new world. And that's where we're going. And everything unlike that has got to collapse. So anybody who's listening to this, have hope, because there's good coming out of it. And you don't have to wait until this all happens before you find the good. You can find the good within you right now by connecting with your heart and living from your soul.
Beautiful. That is absolute 100% the truth. How do you want to feel, right? So what do I think? How do I want to feel? And that'll take you there, take you right in there, won't it? I think that's the only place that any of us can go to find any solace in the contrast that we see. You know, it's hard to look at or whatever. So I choose most of the time to just take a glimpse here and there, because it's, you know, feels so out of control, right? But it's supposed to. We're supposed to be here, and I think it's all just the awakening, the cracking open of, it's like cracking open everybody so that everybody can understand that they have this power, and that it's very important for them to find it and to use it. And I think probably that's the whole awakening that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, what do you, how can people find you? What do you offer for people who want to come in and get some coaching and see you?
Well, people can find me on my website, which is the easiest way. There's a couple of them, but the easiest one is conciergelifecoach.com. www.conciergelifecoach.com. And the website's pretty self-explanatory, and you can set up a free call with me on the schedule there, where we'll get together and you can tell me like what's going on in your life and what's not working, or what you want to change, or what you're unhappy about, or what you're afraid of. And then I'll tune in with you, and as I get information about how I can help you, I'll tell you how it is that I can help you. And I can identify some of the things that are in the way right now that are preventing you from having what you really want, you know, and tell me what you want. What are your goals? What do you want to attain? How do you want to feel? How do you want life to be? What do you want to change? What do you want to see change in your life? And then I can develop really quickly kind of a map on what we would need to do together from a coaching standpoint on how to get you from where you are now to the place that you want to go to. And so it's very powerful, it's very heartfelt, and it's very transformational. So there are activities and downloads and little meditations and clearings and activations of energy that take place, and processes, exercises that take place during the sessions, which we do on the phone or on Zoom or something, whatever we agree on, that enable people to have these transformational experiences. And transformational experiences is where love takes the place of fear oftentimes. And instead of responding to life with fear or anger, you respond with love. And as that starts to occur, all manner of heaven breaks loose in your life. And it's really very groovy. And I've been doing it for almost 40 years now. And I did spend a lot of time, 30 years really, as an executive coach for multi-billion-dollar companies. So I've been in the throes of really challenging situations with people that had a lot riding on, you know, having to change their perceptions and perspective on things in order to survive financially as well as any other way. And I've had a lot of great experiences, a lot of great teachers from a spiritual standpoint, having lived in ashrams in Sedona, Arizona, and I lived in New Zealand for years. I lived in Hawaii for 22 years. So I've been around the block and the planet. I lived in Tahiti for a number of years. I've sailed around the world on a 55-foot catamaran, just exploring, finding native races and the things that connect them with their souls, and some practices that connect people with their souls, and so they can live from their hearts and live happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. And so anyone who's listening, if I can assist you to do that, please contact me at conciergelifecoach.com.
Well, it sounds like you've had a great life. Good on you. Good on you. Yeah, I can't, the importance of having somebody assist us through this process. It's so hard to see ourselves. It's so easy to get stuck, and it's so, you know, what price or what value, you know, reach out and ask for some assistance, everybody, because everybody needs assistance. Everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs someone to say, hey, you know what, you're you know, I can see you're going to go this way again. Let's pull you over this way. You know, it saves you from, you know, years of struggle to find out what you're stumbling on, to, oh, there's my block. Okay, well, I just need to release that. And it just helps you move along on your process so much easier. It's yeah, that you can't put a price on this kind of assistance coaching. So, and you definitely have a full ticket load to offer. My goodness.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really a pleasure meeting you. And yeah, I feel like I have had a nice little session myself, just having the chat with you. So thank you for that. I'm going to put all of your information and anything else that you want, you just give to me, and so that we can put it with our video, and people will not have to have a struggle to find you, but we'll just be able to hit the button and go to you.
Okay, beautiful. Okay. Thank you so much for having me on. It's really been
thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you again down the road.
Me too, totally.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Mark.